Broadcasting from the spooky South Coast and around the world on Midnight FM, this is Midnight Society. I am your host, Tim Weisberg. Whether it is the brightest of day or the darkest of night, wherever you may be, it's time to hunker down for the next 3 hours as we enter into a world of wonder and weird that you won't hear anywhere else. And tonight, we've got a big one for you. We've been telling you for weeks that he was joining us here on the program. Max Brooks is here. We're going to be talking with him about his new book, Devolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre. We'll also talk about World War Z, of course, all kinds of other things as well. And then later on in the program, we'll be joined by Rich Germeau as we're going to be talking about extended experiences of Sasquatch. So it should be a really fun and interesting night. You know how we do it on Friday nights. We love to send you off into the weekend in a big way. And of course, as we get closer to the holidays, you know, we want to pack as much into these shows as we can, because just a reminder, next week we'll be taking some time off for the holidays. We will have a recorded show that I think is going to air on Christmas night, but it's going to be pre-recorded. So just, you know, let the cat out of the bag. But it's going to be a Christmas themed show. So I think you'll really enjoy that. And then, of course, we'll be taking New Year's Eve and New Year's Day off. Well, I think New Year's Day is a Saturday anyway. But we're going to be or maybe, I don't know. I have to look at the calendar. But we're taking a little holiday break to kind of rest up and get ready so we can continue on with strong programs for you in 2021. All right, I'm not going to waste any time tonight. Let's get right into it. Max Brooks is the author of World War Z, The Zombie Survival Guide, Minecraft the Island, and De-Evolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre. His graphic novels include G.I. Joe, Hearts and Minds, The Extinction Parade, Germ Warfare, A Graphic History, and The Harlem Hellfighters. He holds dual fellowships at the Atlantic Council's Brent Southcroft Center for Strategy and Security and the Modern War Institute at West Point, and he joins us now on the program. Good evening, Max. How are you?
Good evening. It's good to be here. And by here, I mean just at the house I haven't left in God knows how long.
I mean, if there's anything, you know, that comes out of a pandemic, is it's a good time to be creative when you're stuck at home.
Well, you know, I wish that were the case. You know, I wish a pandemic would just leave me oodles of free time to finally work on all my lovely projects. But, you know, you got to remember, I am no longer just writer and husband and father. I'm also plumber, electrician, handyman, gardener, cook, dishwasher, and cleaner. So I have to do everything now, or at least maybe 1/3 of it, you know, because there's 3 of us. The dog doesn't help. So not a lot of free time.
Well, still, you were able to put out a new book this year, and I think that is something that a lot of people, when they see the title of this book, and I listen, I saw you on Bill Maher. I love watching all your appearances on there, and I saw the title flash. I saw the book cover flash on the screen real quick when they were introducing you, and I stopped and I said, "Did that say Sasquatch?" And I had to stop and look and read it, and I was like, "Well, it does." And so when I started looking into what it was all about, I said, "Oh man, we got to reach out to Max and see if he'll come on the program." So you know, I want to thank the Bill Maher audience for the people for putting that on the screen, or else I don't know if it would have caught my attention. But the idea of being able to you know, to get out there and get back on programs like that and have some semblance of normalcy for a little while, and now it looks like we might have to pull back even more on that now. I mean, at least we got somewhat of a reprieve of being stuck.
Well, it wasn't much for me because I almost didn't go on the show because we had to be very safe. They assured me I would be safe. Getting into that studio was like the Andromeda Strain. I had to go through several tests before they would even let me in the building. Once I was in the building, I was masked, and I don't mean just masked. I was N95 with surgical mask over it the whole time, right up until I went up on stage. So if you remember, I had this like Rudolph red nose, and that was from the N95 respirator pressing down on it for the hour beforehand. But you know, they usually give me a nice T-shirt or a sweatshirt as swag, and this time I got hand sanitizer, so that was kind of cool.
I always enjoyed when people would put up on Twitter that they got to take the mug home, and then somebody would always comment underneath it like, you weren't supposed to take the mug.
Yeah, no, I did not take, they never gave me a mug, but I gotta say, their t-shirts are really comfortable, and so I kind of look like a self-promotional dick because I'm always wearing them, but the truth is they're like the softest material ever. I love those Bill Maher shirts.
Yeah, go with what's comfortable. Don't worry about what people think. So let's talk about how this book came about. I mean, was it something that was conceived prior to the pandemic?
All right, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to take you way back. It is the late 1970s, maybe early 80s. And we zoom in on a little boy with a bowl haircut sitting in the den of his parents' post-World War II ranch-style house, which was built with basically 50% glass walls, surrounded by trees that rustled in the wind in the night. And the little boy is sitting right next to one of the giant plate glass windows as the trees rustle outside, watching a show called Bigfoot, The Mysterious Monsters, hosted by Peter Graves, in which Peter Graves is telling the boy about Bigfoot. And what you will witness is factual. This may be the most startling footage you will ever see. And then he sees a documentary about Bigfoot, to which it breaks it down like a police drama. Exhibit A, the footprints. Exhibit B, the eyewitness. Exhibit Q, to steal from Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the visions of a psychic detective. And then the little boy is watching what was called a recreation. Now, he doesn't know what dramatization means. He does not know that this is bullcrap. He's watching this woman, Rita Graham, watching TV just as he's watching TV at night, just like it's night for him, sitting next to the window just like him as a giant Sasquatch fist crashes through the window trying to grab her. Well, that set the boy on a lifelong terror of Sasquatch, who then grew up to be me.
So, yeah, I mean, I can imagine that was something that would have a profound effect, but being afraid of it and believing in it are two different things. I mean, did you believe in it, and did you continue to believe in it?
Okay, first of all, why the hell wouldn't I have believed in it when I was a little kid?
True.
Peter Graves told me it was real. He was tall, he had a deep voice, he had white hair, and he said, what you're about to see is factual. Why would I not believe him? And so my friends and I would talk about it. And my friend Richard Cade, who I actually quote in the book, said to me when I was arguing, I said, why did you just shoot him? He said, oh, no, Bigfoot's indestructible. So I believed in it. I believe they were hostile and terrifying. And I believe because the mysterious monsters told me Bigfoot lived in North America, in California. Well, I lived in California. I didn't know that the California I lived in was called Beverly Hills and not Bluff Creek. I thought it was right there. So I was very frightened. And then I grew up, but I never lost the interest. And I started really sort of researching not just Sasquatch, but I think primatology in general. And when it came time to write a Bigfoot story, I approached it the same way I approach every single story. What if this was real? Take out all the fanciful crap. If Sasquatch was a species of great ape living in North America, how would they live? What would they eat? How would they hide? And why would they potentially be hostile to humans? So those are the questions I set out to answer in Devolution.
And those are questions that, you know, researchers of Sasquatch have been looking into for a long time. Did you draw upon the research and the work that's been done by those people, or did you think that, you know, it because you're working in a fictional world, you can take some liberties?
No, not at all. Absolutely. I never pull anything out of my ass, and you can take that to the bank because it's true. Everything I do is based on 100% fact. I dove deeply into works like Grover Krantz and Jeff Meldrum, but I also studied Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall because I wanted to study, like I said, real primatology, how apes really work. Because what I loved about the works of the late Professor Krantz is that he broke it down scientifically. Because the problem is, and we're going to, we'll get into the book later, but I find one of the problems with Sasquatch was the hype, the excitement came about in the 60s and 70s, right as academia was starting to retreat from these unexplained mysteries. So professionals, scientists weren't going anywhere near this. And they left a lot of this work to the amateurs, which is why most books you buy on Sasquatch tends to sometimes veer off into the backwaters of mind control, UFOs. There's a lot of spiritual stuff. There's a lot of crackpots. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but when I was a kid, there was also an In Search of episode. I think there were several about Bigfoot. And there was one of just this moron, this deluded dude wandering around the wilderness going, ook, ook, old friend, ook, I've brought you fish, ook. And he said, well, I have developed a rapport with Sasquatch. There's no evidence. There's no physical proof. He just thinks he's made friends with Sasquatch by saying ook. So when I started to really seriously research Sasquatch lore, I would say the most difficult part was maneuvering like a 1980s video game around all the wackadoos to try to get to the genuine scientists like Meldrum and Krantz.
Yeah, and that's where I've kind of zeroed in on when it comes to what goes on. I mean, I entertain all the theories here on the program, but if it's going to be a real flesh and blood creature, it's going to be the people that study the aspects of it that would account for it being a real flesh and blood creature that are going to draw my attention. And like you said, Meldrum especially is one who has just everything about the physiology of these things. That more than anything has convinced me that they could be real when you start talking about the stride and the way that the footprint is created by the size and the depth of the foot. I mean, it's when you hear it, you say to yourself, okay, this isn't some sort of space alien or transdimensional creature doing this.
Well, and this is why it was so important for me to study genuine primatology as I studied Sasquatch lore, because what confirmed it for me was that Meldrum and Krantz, when they're talking about the physiology, it was exactly what I was reading from Fossey and all the other primatologists, like Jane Goodall. Everything they were talking about not just physiology, but the psychology, the mass psychology, the evolutionary physiology of how we as Homo sapiens began our long journey from Lucy and from before Lucy, from Australopithecus. I always tried to stick to the facts because, in my mind, that's way more interesting than what somebody who just smoked a flower pot of weed might have thought up.
Right. But there's also something to be said, though, for, the fact that it is such an elusive creature that's going to grow a lot of legends around it. I mean, they don't necessarily have to be true, but the stories are still going to be there.
Well, and that's the thing is, unfortunately, humans, we tend to fill the void with whatever our imaginations can come up with. You look at old medieval maps of our oceans, and there were these crazy monsters jumping out of it because people, before we had begun to understand what whales were, they would see the big splashes in the ocean and think, oh, well, there's the sea serpents. This has always been a fascination for mine, which is if monsters exist, can they be proved? And there are real monsters. Right here at the Museum of Natural History in Los Angeles, a prehistoric fish that should have died out millions of years ago was hauled up a few decades ago right off the waters of Catalina Island, where I have swam. So I do think there is the possibility of Sasquatch. Everyone always asks me that. Do you believe in Sasquatch? I said, I believe in the possibility completely. From everything I've studied, there is no reason that a species of great ape could not exist in North America, as opposed to, say, the Loch Ness Monster being a plesiosaur. We know the Loch Ness Monster, if it was a plesiosaur, would be air-breathing. We know the plesiosaurs, and it was an air-breathing dinosaur. So you wouldn't see the Loch Ness Monster come up every couple of months or every couple of years. They'd be up every couple of minutes, like a dolphin. So couldn't exist. But great ape, North America, completely plausible.
And when you're utilizing that as a character, I mean, I think that you really have to get into the, you know, the for lack of a better term, the mindset of how that creature would operate, because it takes a lot to exist and not be found. I mean, and it seems like if it hasn't been found, it's been intentional. It has purposely eluded man for all this time.
Well, this is also what was so important about studying real apes, because many apes are very elusive. It was only in the mid to late 19th century European explorers found the gorilla. But there had been stories about the gorilla for centuries. There had been myths about them. The okapi. There was, I believe, a species of deer in Vietnam only recently uncovered. So I think there are ways that large mammals can still be elusive, especially if you have the thinking brain of an ape.
So, you talked about, being inspired by those specials and shows that you saw when you were younger, but did you continue consuming kind of Sasquatch media to prepare for writing the book?
Constantly. I have a stack of Sasquatch movies that are taller than me. And you can actually see when the interest in Sasquatch has ebbed and flowed, because late 70s to about early 80s was kind of the highlight, and then it all kind of died out. And every now and then one would sort of pop up in the 80s, the 90s, but it really wasn't up until the I'd say early 2000s and the teens that we started to get this just flood of Sasquatch movies. And most of them are just Blair Witch wannabes. But every now and then you get some really, really good ones. And my hat's off to Ryan Schifrin, who did Abominable, because that one is a real movie. I mean, he probably sank his life savings into this. And it's starring Matt McCoy, and it's shot like Rear Window. I don't know if you know that movie. Mm-hmm. My friend Tony Tampone over at Fangoria recommended it to me. And this was actually when I just completed World War Z. I was still watching Sasquatch movies when I was writing about zombies. If you haven't seen it, check out Abominable, because it is Rear Window. It's Matt McCoy's in a wheelchair. He goes up to the cabin with his physical therapist, and he's watching a Sasquatch creature attack his neighbor, but he is chairbound, and he cannot warn them. And it's really, really well thought out, and it's well shot, and I respect the effort that was put into it.
So, but it sounds like you had already considered, this creature to be an antagonist, that, it has to be something that is, the enemy of man.
No. And this was very important, was I'm very clear in the book, and I'm very clear in my research to portray my Sasquatch creatures as animals. And that's the point of the book. Animals are hostile if you do not know about them, if you do not understand them, if you have not taken the time to learn about them, and if you do not respect them. And because in addition to having all those books about primatology, I also had another stack of books about animal attacks. I must have spent years studying animal attacks. Everything from sharks to mountain lions to bears, coyotes, wild boars. That was a big one. And the truth is, animals are not good or evil. Good or evil is a human construct. So my Sasquatch creatures were only hostile because my human creatures got themselves in hot water.
Yeah, that is a very fair point that is lost on people these days, that we think that we are, masters of the world and that everything else has to bow down to us. But when you're out there in the woods staring down, a Sasquatch or a bear or anything that is larger and stronger than you, you are not the top of the food chain in that situation.
No. And this is, that was one of my inspirations. There were two true stories helped propel me to initially pitch this idea and get the ball rolling. And the first one was, there's a great book called The Beast in the Garden. And it's about mountain lions coming back to Boulder, Colorado, and about the citizens of Boulder, these well-meaning urbanites, welcoming them because it's nature. Oh my God, honey, there's a mountain lion in the backyard. Grab the camera. And they didn't understand these are carnivores. These are predators. They are dangerous. They need to be respected as that. This is not a Disney movie. And sure enough, by screwing it up, the mountain lions eventually got over their fear of humans. And first they came after the little dogs, and then the big dogs, and then they started coming after people. And before you know it, a big, tall, strapping young man went out for a run one day right behind his high school and never came back. And they found what was left of him out in the woods. So that was the first story. And the second one was the story of the grizzly man, Timothy Treadwell. For those of you who don't know who that is, he lived right here, probably next to me in Venice Beach. Never grew up in the wilderness, knew nothing about the wilderness, but that didn't matter because he just knew better. He thought that he knew better, and so he took it upon himself to save the Alaskan brown bear. So every summer he would pack up, he would fly to Alaska, and then he would sneak onto the Alaskan Grizzly Bear Reserve to film himself like David Attenborough with the bears. And he would name them like Mr. Chocolate, and he would be their friend because he knew better. He knew how to survive. No one had to teach him anything. And then he was eaten by a bear. And by the way, him and his girlfriend, they were both eaten by the bear. So he got someone else killed. And because the bear was then classified as a man-eater, it had to be put down. So way to save the bears, asshole.
Right. Yeah, I mean, listen, I just had a story in the news. I was reading, working in the news department of my day job, the radio station I worked during the day. We just had a story about a turkey that had to get put down because it was attacking people. I mean, this is, something as simple as a turkey, but man screwed it up because they were constantly feeding it. And so then it became aggressive every time it saw a person looking for food.
Right. They're animals. You have to respect their laws. I mean, just forget all the dramatic stuff about animal attacks. Think about how we grew up. How many of us or how many people we knew as kids were bitten on the face by a dog that they didn't know that they tried to hug?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then eventually we learned, when you put your face in the face of a strange dog, that's an attack. That's a challenge. We think we're being cute and giving it a kiss, like Charlie Brown kissing Snoopy. We didn't realize, they think we're coming in for the kill. So in my story, my characters, I don't know if we want to jump into the book yet, but my characters are in an eco-community in the Pacific Northwest. And when I say eco-community, I don't mean some hippy-dippy compound, where they shot out in the woods. This is high-tech. This is the pinnacle of modern technology. This is drone delivery. This is telecommuting to work. This is solar panels. This is biodigesting toilets that turn your poo into methane that you can cook with. These are high-end homes, because the whole point is it's green technology allowing you to live with the comforts of Manhattan in the wilderness. So these people... they think they've got it all. I mean, my God, you get up, you get to telecommute to work all day, and then at the end of your day, you get to go for a walk in the virgin wilderness. I mean, and it's working.
You can't go better than that. Tell you what, I would say we're going to take a really quick break here, and we come back on the other side. Let's dive right into the book and tell people all about it.
You bet. Let's do this.
All right. We are going to take a quick break. During the break, if you have any questions that you would like me to pose to Max, just send them on over tim@midnight.fm. Put them in the Midnight Society Facebook group. Put them on Twitter, #MidnightFM, or put them in our Discord server. We'll be back with more with Max Brooks right here on Midnight Society on Midnight FM.
listening to Midnight Society with Tim Weisberg on Midnight FM.
And back in with more Midnight Society. Tonight we are talking with Max Brooks. He is the author of the new book, Devolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre, and he's telling us about the novel now. And you were saying before, Max, before the break, that talking about this being a commune, a kind of a planned community, and a good microcosm of kind of society today.
Well, yeah, I was saying that these, this is not a hippie commune. This is a nice bedroom community, but instead of having to commute to work, you telecommute to work. These are urban professionals who are living in a rural setting, and they think they have it all until Mount Rainier erupts. And they are safe in that Mount Rainier explodes in the direction of Seattle, Tacoma, but they are cut off. And like I said, these are not hippies. These are not mountain people. These are lawyers, college professors. One of them is a sensitivity reader, works for a big publishing company that goes through books and censors out anything that might be offensive to people. So these are highly paid, highly educated David Sedaris fans who don't know how to change a light bulb. And they're trapped, and winter is coming, and they're also forgotten because all the rescue efforts are going towards Seattle, Tacoma, and they're outside the blast zone. So nobody's even looking for them, and they need to learn how to survive. And that's the least of their problems, because the eruption has also driven a pack of Sasquatch creatures away from their traditional foraging ground. And this is the fall, when they're supposed to stock up on calories. And these large primates are very hungry and omnivorous. And they come right across this community, which to them looks like a pen of sheep.
So, I mean, when you were deciding how to create this community, what did you kind of draw on as inspiration, or did you kind of look at it as who would be, the least effective group to be prepared for something like this?
No, these communities are real. They're popping up, and I actually spoke to an old family friend from Microsoft who helped me design it, the technology of it, because all the technology is already there, and they are starting to put them into these green communities. The actual characters are all based on people I know. Like I said, I don't make anything up. I either amalgamate characters, which I take different personality traits from different people, put them into one, or they're just straight up people I've met or know very well. So, but you're right. There was a conscious effort to people my community with residents who don't know how to do anything, because that's the world I live in. The people around me are well educated and they consider themselves very intelligent, and most of them have no usable skills whatsoever. Whatever skill they have goes to making money, to paying people, to doing the manual labor that keeps them alive.
So is this an intentional commentary on that lifestyle, or just the reality of the situation to put these characters in?
Well, it is. It's the reality of the situation, but yes, it also is a very conscious commentary on people who live in bubbles. And I know that well. I grew up in a bubble. I grew up in a bubble of people who were completely out of touch with the rest of the country, and it only took me towards maybe my later adolescence to realize, I don't think all the smart grown-ups around me have any idea what country we're living in. And then also just traveling this country, seeing the different types of people we have, different places that we live in, and understanding that a good portion of the well-to-do people do not know how to take care of themselves at all. There was a documentary Martin Scorsese did about Fran Lebowitz. She's a New York witicist, and she's very derisive about what she calls herds of hillbillies who come to New York as tourists. And yet, later in the documentary, she tells a story about she used to drive this big car. She didn't know how to put gas in the car. And she got in an argument with a guy at a gas station asking him to help her. And it's cute and it's funny, like everything she does. But the deeper meaning I took from that story is, you know who does know how to fill up your car? Those hordes of hillbillies that you're dumping all over.
I mean, we're certainly seeing that happen in America today, where, you know, there's definitely a line that's been drawn between the regular, everyday, average American and the people that they call the quote unquote elites.
Well, and, you know, and I'm not being liberal or conservative. I remember one time I got into it with a guy on Fox News Radio because he kept saying, we were talking about coming together as a society, as a country. He said, yeah, but what about individualism? What about the idea of doing stuff for yourself? And I said, where are you broadcasting from? And he's like, New York City. And I'm like, oh, so you're broadcasting from the most interconnected, interdependent microcosm on the face of this planet, and you're telling me about individualism. And there's a lot of that hypocrisy out there. There was a woman, I don't know, I don't want to presume you don't know her, Ayn Rand, the writer. Mm-hmm. A lot of conservatives love her and they worship at her feet because she wrote a lot about individualism, right? And she hated collectivization, people coming together to do stuff. She always believed it was the individual that made things work. Now, if she had written all that from her cabin in rural Wyoming, where she sheared her own sheep for clothes and grew her own food and fixed her own roof when it leaked, good for her, walk the walk. But she didn't. She wrote from the big city where somebody else kept her lights on and her water running and took out her garbage and put out fires and kept the street lights working. And if someone broke into her house, would show up and haul them off to jail. And did all those things to leave her free to do nothing else but write about the individual.
Yeah, and the idea of, you know, the individual being lost in a larger society is a myth as far as I'm concerned. That you, just because you can work together and be part of a larger knit thing doesn't mean that it robs you of any kind of individual identity. It's how mankind survived. You know, it's how we got to the point that we're in today. We didn't get here by operating alone. Alone we die in the woods. Together we conquer the elements.
That's exactly right. And this is a problem I have with way too many sort of post-apocalyptic hero stories, because it's always about the lone wolf. It's about this alpha male who sort of rises from the ashes. And there's almost a sense that it's a good thing because society was holding him back. And now he gets to be the macho warlord that he was always meant to be. And that's all bullcrap, because that's not how it works. Like you said, we became the dominant species on the planet by cooperation. First through family units, and then extended families, and then by tribe, and then by nation state. And now this planet where one thing happens on the other side of the world affects us all. So this notion of the lone wolf does not work, has never worked. And if you ever want to challenge me on this, just research the average life expectancy of the average Somali warlord.
Yeah. I can imagine that it's not very effective when you're trying to do things on your own. Now, is there also something to be said for, needing to have that individualized spirit, though, because that is what drives you to personally thrive and be your best. That without it, without having that sense of individualism, you would become too reliant upon the group, and then you wouldn't be able to function for yourself.
No, you're right. You're right. I think that, and I've been doing a lot of talks about this during the pandemic, which is you don't want to be so specialized and so dependent that you don't know how to take care of yourself. I mean, people are always asking me, what do I need to do in the pandemic? And I said, look, you don't need to build a toilet from scratch. But when there's no plumber to call, you should know how to fix your own toilet. And this notion of living in a society, but sort of taking care of yourself, that's nothing new. That was our grandparents. How often did your parents want to call the electrician or the plumber or the mechanic, and your grandparents would be like, oh, come on, you can do this. This is simple. There are basic skills, minimal skills that we should all have to keep our lives going. But when it gets to the higher functions, then you bring in a specialist. And that's how societies run.
Or even better, nowadays, if I need to fix something in the house, because I'm cheap and I don't want to have to call somebody, what's the first thing that I do is I go to YouTube and I watch a video of how to do it myself. So I'm going back to that collective to try to get the information to help me do things on an individual basis.
Exactly right. I mean, I think that's the crux of how humanity moves forward, and you don't want to go one way or the other way. If you go, what's great about the United States is we're a moderate country. We pretty much strike an amazing balance between the needs of the individual and the needs of the group. And sometimes we go a little far one way and a little far the other way, but we never go too far either way. We never go so far that we're Red China during the Cultural Revolution, where we're burning books and turning in our parents, but we also don't go too far to the other way where we are Somalia, where everything breaks down. And basically you have to give your daughter to the local warlord to get water from the well.
So, having that balance, now you're going to create a community in this story that has flaws within that balance.
Yes. So my community, most of them are intellectual muckety-mucks who can't do anything for themselves. They have one neighbor. She's an artist. She works in glass blowing and she's a sculptor, but she also grew up in the former Yugoslavia. So she knows how bad things can get. And she has she might not have the actual skills of how to survive in this particular crisis, but she has the mindset to make the mental switch on a dime. And that's the most critical thing. And that's actually a very important factor in real disasters. Most people die in real disasters because they are trying to make that psychological shift from everything's fine, someone's going to take care of me, to, oh my God, I need to take care of myself. And a lot of people die in the gray zone, frozen, unable to shift. And this character does. This character goes, bam, hey people, we're in trouble, let's get to work. And when you can rally in the face of danger, that can bring out the best in people, but it sounds like that isn't necessarily what happens with these people. It brings out the best and the worst. It's like weddings and funerals. You really see the best and the worst in people. Some of the characters really rise to the occasion. They dig deep and find it empowering. I have one character who really had sort of given up and was raised, never failed, never was given the chance to fail, was told by his parents he was awesome and he didn't really have to work very hard. And then he got out in the world and the world said, you actually do have to work hard. And he didn't know how, and he didn't know how to recover. And he was just stuck in this limbo. And yet suddenly, bam, he crashes into this disaster and he rises to the occasion and he realizes, hey, there's more to me. There's more that I can do, and I found my worth. And so that's one character. Another character just sinks into absolute denial and mania because their whole success is based on the illusion of success. And when it's time to really do the work, they just can't. They just don't have what it takes.
And what's interesting about this, and I don't think I'm giving away any plot points here because it's in the Amazon description, but what's interesting about this is it's not something that they do that causes them to be in this situation. It's a natural event that puts them on this path.
Yeah, it's the eruption of Mount Rainier. They didn't choose this. This is, in this way, it's not a traditional horror story because most horror stories begin with our characters, usually a small group, making a bad choice, right? Don't go in there. And they go in there. Don't do that. And then they do it anyway, and then the chain of events starts. Our characters, they think they're just living their lives, and then something bad happens to them. And that's why when Mount Rainier erupts and they're cut off, initially most of them are waiting to be rescued because, right, they pay their taxes and they believe in the system, and they're like, well, surely there's a they is coming for us. To which our immigrant character says, no, there is no they. We are they. It's up to us.
Yeah, and that's, as you said, that's when you see the best and the worst of people. When that realization sets in that you do have to fend for yourself, it's fight or flight. Some people rise and some people fall, and that's when you get to see, who is built for survival and who isn't.
Yeah, and and like I said, everything I do, I base in reality. I've studied for years the psychology of crisis. What happens when something really bad happens really fast? And, it's interesting. I was listening to an interview with an Iraq war veteran, and he said, the common myth about soldiers in combat is that some of them freeze and some of them don't. And that's actually not true. He said psychologically, everyone freezes. The question is, how long is that freeze going to happen? Sometimes that freeze is just a nanosecond. Sometimes it's forever. We saw after 9/11, President Bush froze. Was it 7 minutes? Just froze. Just had no idea what to do when he was told the country was attacked and just sat there. Now, that's actually rather small when you think that when Hitler attacked the Soviet Union, Stalin froze for 4 hours. And even worse, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, way out in the Philippines, General MacArthur froze for 24 hours. Literally, he could have had the Philippines on a war footing, ready to go and slaughtered the Japanese when they came for him, but he absolutely froze. And so when the Japanese came, it was Pearl Harbor 2.0.
And yeah, I mean, we're talking about people that you wouldn't think would have frozen in those situations.
No, you'd think, well, they're a leader. They're a leader. They must have done things. But this can be a problem. Sometimes if you're an A-type, if you're a go-getter, a doer, an aggressor, those people aren't guaranteed to react well. They're good at acting, but sometimes when something happens to them, they don't know how to react. I mean, I think one of the greatest examples of someone who never failed and didn't know and then was paralyzed by their own success was a guy named George B. McClellan, who was commander of the Grand Army of the Potomac in the Civil War, right? He was in charge. He was the guy. And he was the golden boy, top of his class. He'd never failed. He'd never had anything bad happen to him. And then suddenly he's in charge of the Army of the United States during the Civil War, and he would not attack. And he panicked, and he kept writing to President Lincoln, I need more men, I need more time, I need to train more, I need more equipment. And Lincoln said, get off your ass and attack. And he wouldn't do it. And so finally Lincoln got rid of the golden boy and found the biggest, pardon my language, the biggest fuck up he could find was a guy named General Grant. Ulysses S. Grant had failed at almost everything. But nobody knew how to pick himself up off his ass and recover like Grant. So Grant knew, okay, I can take failure and I can bring you success. And then Grant attacked and won us the war.
And yeah, and there is something to be said for the people that have done that. You know, what's the saying? You know, it's not how many times you fall down, it's whether or not you get back up.
Yeah, you have to deal with failure. I'm always very wary of the golden boys. Anybody who hasn't had something bad happen to them, eventually it will. It happens to everybody. So I don't want a guy on my team who's never failed, because what if suddenly we're confronted by failure and it's his first time he's failed? I don't want to have to deal with his nervous breakdown. I want someone who's been like, listen, I've been down this road. I failed as much as I've succeeded. I know how to recover. Let's do this.
I mean, I could make some allegories with that to what's going on the national stage right now, but but that is part of it. It's exactly what you're talking about. That when you are not used to having to survive, you can't survive. You know, everybody. I mean, this is kind of a throwback to World War Z, but you know, people talk all the time about. They joke around about a zombie apocalypse, and there's people who say, "Oh, you know, I would be all set because you know I know how to handle a weapon, I know how to do this, I know how to do that." And all I think of to myself is, but if you were in a situation like that, first of all, like, how long is it going to take you to get over the shock that it's actually really happening? And second of all, how are you sure that you will definitely succeed in reality just because you think you will succeed in your mind? I understand positive thinking, but it's a completely different story when, you know, there's 500 zombies trying to break into your door.
Oh my God, no. I've had this argument so many times. It's funny because, you know, World War Z came out right after Hurricane Katrina. And one of the consistent argument I got from people was, well, now, you know, like, now we know about zombies because of like all the zombie movies. So like, we'd be okay. And I said, no. Knowing that a threat is out there does not guarantee that you will either prepare for it or react to it well. I used to say people in New Orleans before Katrina knew about water. In fact, people in New Orleans knew the levees were going to break someday. The government knew, the federal government knew, the state and local city government knew. Everybody knew. What happened? You saw that in this pandemic. You know, there's a phrase that came out after 9/11 from Governor Tom Ridge, who became the first director of or Secretary of Homeland Security. He called 9/11 a failure of imagination. And you could give him credit for that because 9/11 was a relatively new event. But failures of imagination are very rare. This pandemic we're living in now was not a failure of imagination. People knew about plagues. In fact, we had a plan. It's sitting right here on my desk. We have trained professionals. We had everything ready. What happened? So to the people who think, oh, when a zombie apocalypse happens, I know what I'm going to do. And I'm like, okay, really? Why is that? Well, because I have like an AR-15 and like 1,000 rounds of ammunition. And I'm like, well, great. What do you do when 1,001 zombies show up?
Right, exactly. And also, by the way, I mean, not to use another zombie media as an allegory here, but if you look at, you know, Walking Dead, I used to scream at the TV because for the first 2 seasons, they killed every zombie that they saw. And, you know, I look at it like this, like, think about it if you live in a place where there's a lot of, you know, bees and hornets around. You can't kill everyone you see. Eventually, you just have to learn how to avoid them. And that's why I would scream at it. Like, in reality, you would never want to just sit there and defend yourself against zombies. You would want to learn how to survive around them, which is what I think is lost on a lot of people.
No, you know, there's a great book. When I was a kid, when I was in my 20s, living overseas, working overseas, I read Robert Heinlein's Tunnel in the Sky. And that sort of, that really did shape my thinking for the rest of my life on survival. Because I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's a great book. He wrote Starship Troopers. But in Tunnel in the Sky, these kids, I think when they turn 18, they have to do a survival test. It's set in the future, and they go through a wormhole, and the wormhole sets them down on an uninhabited planet, and they just have to survive for a few days or a few weeks. And our young friend who's about to do this, his older sister who's done it before him, says, listen, don't try to be a predator. Don't try to be a hero. You know, don't think like a lion. Think like a rat. Think like a cockroach. Think like a survivor, because that's who you are. And that really stuck with me. I'm like, oh yeah, if you're in a war situation, yeah, you're a warrior. Your job is to fight, attack, kill the enemy. But if you're in a survival situation, your job is to survive. And so even in a zombie outbreak, the act of violence, I believe, is an act of failure. Because if you do your job right, you should never see a zombie. If you have to get to a point where you fire a gun, that means you have made a chain of mistakes that has led you to that moment.
That's the most perfect way to put it. And that's what I'm going to use as my go-to line now when people ask, hey, what would you do in the zombie apocalypse? Like, avoid zombies. That's exactly the way that it would be. All right, well, we are going to take our next break. When we come back, more with Max Brooks. If you want to find out more about him, or if you want to pick up the book for yourself, all you have to do is go to midnight.fm, and when you get there, click on his photo. That will take you over to the page that we've made for tonight's show. You'll see his bio there. You'll see links to all of his books. We'll talk about some of them coming up in the next segment as well. You can follow him on Twitter there. You can get to his website, and, of course, you can get all the music that we play here on the program. It is supplied to us by Matt Sharp and the Rentals. You know Matt from his time in Weezer, and of course the Rentals had a big hit with Friends of P, and now they have a new album out called Q36. It is inspired by the kinds of topics that we talk about here on the program. You know, all these kinds of fringe and interesting things. That's the inspiration behind all these songs, and we have remixes of them, exclusive remixes that Matt provided to us to use as our bumper music, so you can pick those up on midnight.fm as well. When you go to the page to pick up Max's books, just scroll down a little bit more and you'll see all the links to get the Rentals music, whether it be via their Bandcamp page where you can order the Q36 album or the Z36 remix album, or if you want to just stream it on Apple Music or Spotify, you can do it right there. And I'm telling you, when you're reading Devolution and you are looking to get into the vibe, turn on the Rentals, and that will help take you exactly into the story. And we'll talk more about that coming up in just a few moments. Also, you can shoot over your questions, tim@midnight.fm. You can put them in the Midnight Society Facebook group, put them on Twitter, #MidnightFM, put them in Discord, all those places. Back with more Midnight Society in just a moment on Midnight FM.
You're listening to Midnight Society with Tim Weisberg on Midnight FM.
And welcome back into Midnight Society here on Midnight FM. We are talking with Max Brooks. He is the author of World War Z, of course, but also his new book is called Devolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre. And we've been talking about, what would happen to people if they did get put in a position where they had to survive, if they were, thrown up against it and it was do or die. Are people of today prepared to be able to do that? And Max, you had mentioned a little bit about the way that you kind of look at things. Do you think that you'd be built to survive something like what happens in this book?
I don't know. I've never been in that situation, so I can't tell you. I've been in scary situations. I've been in situations where I've had to, my whole life has been situations where I've had to get out of my comfort zone and learn new skills and grow and face a lot of fear. I can tell you that I sincerely hope I am never in that situation where suddenly I look out the window and there's a giant Sasquatch face pressed up against the glass. I might survive, but my underwear won't.
So, yeah, just make sure you have plenty of drawers so that you can always change them out. But, I think everybody today wants to be able to, because it doesn't matter what the threat may be. We want to be prepared for whatever might come down the line. And the more that we think about it, the more we realize that we are over dependent on things. Just look what happens if there's a snowstorm and the power goes out. If that happens to me here, okay, I'm fine for a few hours, but after a few hours, I can't even keep myself warm.
No, this is a huge problem. This is something that all Americans need to understand, is that living in North America, we have the most extreme weather of anywhere on the planet. And it doesn't matter where you live in the United States or even Canada, there's extreme weather, and that's an enemy. And you need to be able to take care of yourself for at least 3 days, because yes, we have FEMA, we have the National Guard, but these emergency services, they need to organize themselves. Sometimes there's warning, like if there's a nor'easter or if there's a hurricane, but in something like an earthquake, that's instantaneous. So you have to, what they call self-rescue, long enough for them to rescue you, which means you have to have a survival kit. It's got to be in a safe place. You have to have a plan. You also have to know the nature of the threat. I get asked this a lot. What should I have in my survival kit? And I ask the askers, where do you live? Because all survival kits are environment specific. I live in Southern California. Water and shade are the key. But if I lived in the Pacific Northwest, staying warm and dry would be the key to survival. Mm-hmm. So you got to know your environment. And you also have to know, well, what kind of threat does that mean? Like here in Southern California, the threat is the earthquake. So I have to make sure, is my gas going to shut off? That's not going to work if I get a gas-powered generator if the power goes out. I have to make sure that if it's an electric generator, is the gasoline going to gunk if it's a gasoline generator? And then I have to find a way to purify water and stay put. So there's a lot to know, but I will tell you this. What I have learned studying crisis in the decades that I have been studying crisis is that the more you know about something, the less anxiety you feel. At least I do. Because it's like we were talking about earlier. When you really don't know the nature of a threat, your imagination can make up some really wonderful stuff. But the more you study it, the more light you shine on it. It's kind of like, remember when we first saw Jaws, and we didn't know anything about that thing. We didn't know what it was. We just saw it from the point of view from underwater. But by Act 3, when we saw the shark and it was a 25-footer, we could see it. I don't know about you, but for me, the fear ebbed because now I know what I'm up against.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, absolutely. And that's why I look at something like, preppers, doomsday preppers, people who are constantly preparing for every eventuality. You can't prepare for every eventuality. So therefore, you're kind of never mastering anything and just living in fear of the one thing that you haven't planned for.
No, exactly. A friend of mine is Les Stroud, Survivor Man. And we were just laughing about this, about how some survival kits say things like, well, you need an axe or a saw to chop firewood. And we were like, how many of us are actually in a disaster going to be able to flee into virgin wilderness and chop down trees for firewood? Most of us live in megacities, sprawling megacities. And the truth is, in a disaster like an earthquake, you're not going to live like Jeremiah Johnson. You're going to live like a homeless person. So that's the situation you need to prepare for. Likewise, Les Stroud, he's so brilliant because he's just so simple and makes so much common sense. He said, don't go on a prepper website and just buy what they tell you to buy. When it comes to things like stocking up food, stock up on what you would eat. Don't buy 30 pounds of lentils if you hate lentils, because then they're just going to sit there. If the disaster doesn't come and you stock up on what you would have eaten anyway, then you'll just eat it.
Yeah. It's not like all of a sudden you're going to suddenly like the things that you have available. I mean, if you're forced into a situation, sure. I mean, if it's the end of the world and all I have is cottage cheese, I guess I will eat it, but I also don't put cottage cheese in my fridge planning on that would be what I would eat if the world ended.
Right. And that actually is very critical, because I made a huge mistake at the beginning of the pandemic, and I will admit that, because I was in don't starve mode. Way before the pandemic even hit us, back in January, I knew it was coming. And I thought, all right, you ain't going to pull one over on me, coming plague. So I went out and I bought just an ass ton full of emergency food supplies, mainly dried foods like rice and beans. All right, flash forward a couple months, 24 hours before the LA lockdown. I'm like, honey, we're set. I say to my wife, we're good. I got rid of rice and beans. And my wife says, beans upset my stomach and I don't like to eat rice. And I thought, oh, shit. And she said, I like leafy greens, right? You know that. We've been together for 20 years. And I thought, yeah, I knew that. She's like, we eat together every day. You've seen me, right? Yeah. And she said, well, I'm going to go to the store and get spinach. I said, don't go to the store. That's where all the COVID is. So right. Emergency, 24 hours before lockdown, I had to jump in the car, race over to the gardening store, and buy every little seedling of leafy greens, lettuce, spinach, things like that, put them in the garden, and we lived off that for 3 months. Thank God I got lucky. But boy, you want to talk about a cock-up in planning? Look no farther than me.
Well, speaking of the pandemic, I see a lot of reviews of the book that reference this being an allegory for COVID-19. And I know the book came out in June. And I'm just trying to think of, timeline wise, getting it out there to the public, getting it published, edited, published, all that kind of stuff. Was this written in response to the pandemic, or it sounds like it was something you've been planning for a long time.
Yeah.
Is it just a convenient tie-in, or is there something there?
No, God, no. I came up with this idea 10 years ago, and I sold it as a movie to Legendary. And then they got a writer and they got a director, and it went into development and it didn't go anywhere. And I didn't like the direction it was going in anyway. It ended up being closer to a 1980s Golan Globus action film. But I asked Thomas Tull, who created Legendary Entertainment, I said, can I please just have the novel rights back? Just let me write the book the way I see it. And God bless him, he was generous enough to give me the book back. So I wrote this thing, oh God, I wrote it years before. As a matter of fact, the book was done and ready to go way before the pandemic even started in China. It would have come out a year earlier, except that my parent publishing house folded up and was absorbed into the bigger one. So just business-wise set us back a year.
So yeah, so there you have it, folks. It's something that keeps popping up in every review that I read about it, but it's just kind of, I don't want to say convenient. It seems like a bad word to use, but certainly serendipitous in the sense of, it shows people how it could have been. That if we hadn't relied on each other and brought out the best in each other, we could have suffered the same fate.
Yeah, I think it was just a case of coincidental timing. But the truth is, I write a lot about disasters because disasters continually happen and will continually happen. it's not always a plague. It's a natural disaster. It's a terrorist attack. It's something. But that's what I write about. I write about normal life ending as we know it and having to learn new skills to survive a crisis. So, yeah, maybe this, I don't know, serendipitous, whatever you want to call it. But if it hadn't been COVID-19, some other disaster would have come up.
Hopefully, hopefully we learn the lessons from this one and we don't kind of suffer through, anything that comes down the line the same way that we've had through this. But also, I mean, looking at the way that it has brought out kind of the best in humanity in a lot of cases, but it's also brought out kind of the dark side of things too. The people who are just never going to get on board and the people who are being difficult, I think in a lot of cases, just for the sake of being difficult, because you can't really not believe science and medicine, but I guess you're entitled not to if you want to. But it shows that we are reliant on each other and we're reliant on what each other can bring to the table when it comes to information, when it comes to strategy. It is going to fall upon us to do what we have to do, but we can, the cooperative learning model that I learned in elementary school, where everybody broke off into their little groups and they would have a group. And then from that group, you would go off to other groups where you would learn one thing. And then you would bring that one thing back to your home group and then teach each other that same thing. I mean, that's the way that society should function.
Yeah, that's exactly how it should function. That's how it does function is you have groups of specialists who are really good in their fields. And really, if you want to have a winning combination of a team, you need what's called horizontal and vertical thinkers. And horizontal thinkers are the big picture ones, and vertical ones do the deep dives. And when you get them both together, you really get the length and breadth and width of a problem and a solution. And that's how we should be solving problems.
But also solving problems is, kind of the natural thing that we want to do. A person doesn't like an unsolved mystery. We want to have a natural conclusion to things, and it makes it harder when we don't know how things are going to end. When that's the hardest part of this has been all the uncertainty of it. That's what's made it so taxing on people. If you could just say to them, hey, listen, folks, you just got to get through a year and a half, and then everybody will be inoculated that wants to be inoculated. The rest of them can all go through their herd immunity or whatever they want to do. But, 2 years from now, you'll be able to live life somewhat similar to what you are now. If somebody could have said that at the very beginning in a convincing way, we would have been able to internalize it better. But the uncertainty is what hurts us.
I couldn't agree more. I think you're 100% right. Human beings crave stability, and we abhor the unknown. And I think you're 100% right. I think if someone had said, listen, this plague we guarantee will end New Year's Eve 2022, then everybody would have been okay, and we would have had a big plague clock ticking, and it would have gotten rid of a lot of the uncertainty of it. But when you say, hey, it could end here, it could end not, it could do this and that, and the worst part is when you lie, when you say, don't worry, by spring it's going to go away. It's going to go away. When you try to calm people down with lies, that is, there have been, I don't know how many books written about this. It's the worst way to calm people down, because then you lose all credibility, and then people really tip over into panic.
I guess that, though, the benefit of having gone through this now is it has taken away some of the softness of society and kind of shown us what will happen if we do have to band together, work together, and face something like this. So hopefully it's not, it's lessons learned from mistakes made, and we are better suited for the future.
I hope you're right. I hope we've learned, or some of us have learned, if nothing else, to respect disease in the way that we haven't for generations. Back up until, I would say, the mid 20th century, diseases were the number one killers and cripplers of the human race, particularly in the Western world. And with the explosion of vaccines and of public health, we have taken our number one killer and really made it an inconvenience. And the problem is 3 generations of that, you then get a society that takes public health for granted and says, oh, I don't have to worry about this. And we saw the result. And now we've got over 250,000 dead, over 300,000 dead, and a lot more people are going to die before this thing passes by. So hopefully we'll come out of it with people saying, you know what, being healthy, understanding science, understanding microbes, we can't screw around.
And hopefully people are paying attention enough to just become more educated. You know, I couldn't believe the fact that we had to explain to people in 2020, because of a global pandemic, to remember to wash their hands when they leave the bathroom.
Oh, well, you see it. You know, I think, washing hands started in the 19th century with this guy Semmelweis, Dr. Semmelweis, who saw that doctors were killing pregnant women in childbirth, because they were going from surgery to delivering babies. And he thought, wow, washing your hands, you save lives. And my grandparents were very big on that because they understood diseases can kill. My mother understood this. But, the people my age and their children, there was this whole, especially in Western LA, oh my God, this notion that Earth Mother Gaia would take care of you if you just had the right healing crystals and got the gluten out of your muffin, you'd be fine.
Well, I don't want to end our conversation on a down note. I want to bring up some fun stuff before we're done here. And of course, one of the great things about the pandemic happening is people have turned to programs like this. People have turned to podcasts. They're finding entertainment in different ways. And one thing that I know has exploded in recent months is audiobooks. And I know that you're involved with the audiobook version of your books.
Yeah, I am very involved because I'm very dyslexic, and school and I did not get along. And I probably never would have graduated if it wasn't for my mother. My mother had me tested. God knows how she knew about dyslexia, late 70s, early 80s. But she had me tested at the Marion Frostick Center, and they discovered that I learned audibly. And so first thing she did was take all the books I had to read for school to the Institute for the Blind, the Braille Institute in Los Angeles, and had them all read onto audio cassette. And so I could listen, and that saved me. And audiobooks, even before that, had been important to me because my mother read to me every night as a kid, and she was also an Academy Award-winning actress who had a very big, full career. So when she would have to go away for a few weeks to finish shooting a movie, she made sure to finish the book she was reading me onto audio cassette. So one way or another, my mother was reading to me every night. And so when it came time for me to do audiobooks, I begged Random House initially to let me in and let me help, because I'd done cartoon voices. I knew people's agents. I said, let me try and cast it as an all-star audiobook. And that's how we did World War Z. And so now every time an audiobook comes in, I'm in there with the casting. I will write personal letters to people. I'll get down on my knees, whatever I have to do to get the talent in to make it a number one production.
I mean, that's pretty incredible to, a lot of people are just happy to have somebody reading their book, but it's a totally different thing to turn it into a performance like that.
No, it has to be. I mean, one of the biggest coups I ever got was F. Murray Abraham reading a role in World War Z. And they said, you're never going to get him. The guy doesn't roll out of bed for anything less than a small fortune. And I wrote him a letter and I said, Mr. Abraham, when I was a kid, my mother got me the audio version of Tom Clancy's Red Storm Rising. And you read that. And you read all the parts. And you did all the accents. Russian, Norwegian, English. It was amazing. And you showed me that audiobooks could be an art form unto themselves. And so I cannot give you, unfortunately, a small fortune. But I can give you the satisfaction of making that kid's dream come true. So he did it. He read it. And thank God. So, yeah, for me, there's no excuse not to get the best talent and make it a production worthy of a 1930s radio drama.
Oh, that's the best way. I mean, that's still what I listen to when I go to bed every night, is that kind of stuff. So to be able to bring that type of atmosphere to the stories that you're writing now is just amazing. And speaking of writing stories, you also have, you're kind of a literary Hitchcock to some degree, that you put yourself into your stories.
Sometimes I do. But are they me? Or are they not me? I try to keep. That was a big thing in the backstory of World War Z, the movie. J. Michael Straczynski wrote the first draft of the script, but then had to go to the Writers Guild to lobby to get credit, and I had to come in as on his side to lobby for him and say, "Listen, I'm not Brad Pitt. There's no Jerry Lane. I have nothing to do with this. In fact," I had to show him the book and say, "I'm invisible. I have tried to keep myself out of this story. If there is a hero in the World War Z movie, it was created by J. Michael Straczynski, not me."
Well, I mean, listen, I think that, this is a prime example, though, of how, creativity and doing what it is that you love can pay off. Looking at your career, I mean, you get to do a lot of really cool stuff. But also at the same time, you also have the opportunity to work in the political world and even in the military world. Like, you have a lot of hats that you wear. I mean, how do you keep a balance to all these different things? Do you have to compartmentalize them, or do you allow them to kind of cross into each other?
No, that's why they want me. That's why I'm always being asked for, because what I'm good at as an outsider is appreciating a world that I'm not part of, without going too deep. And I'm not the first guy to do that. Tom Clancy never spent a day in uniform. He was a total nerd. He was an insurance salesman from Maryland. But he appreciated this world, and he studied this world, and he was able to write about the world of national security better than the people who actually lived it. So when I'm working for the Brent Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, or the Modern War Institute at West Point, I write a lot about the creative process, which they need, which we all need. But I more than a teacher, I am a student. And I get to listen to experts in their fields talk about what we're facing on a level I never would have done had I not been invited by them in their world. And all I have to do to pay them back is do analysis sometimes of threats that are not military that might become military, or to help writing programs, or just to help creativity. I tell the story of the guy who invented the M1 carbine rifle that my dad carried in World War II. It was invented by a cop-killing bootlegger.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a guy who was Carbine Williams, and he shot a federal officer and was sent to jail for the rest of his life. But he was not educated, but he was very smart. And the warden of the story, the warden of the prison, saw him sketching a gun and said, "Williams, what are you doing?" And Williams said, "Well, I came up with this idea of a gun that uses the explosive power of the shell to eject the shell and load the next one. So every time I pull the trigger, I'm loading the gun." And the warden was the hero of the story, because the warden said, "I'm going to let you finish your sketch, and then I want you to build a prototype in the prison workshop." And the warden was hauled up before the prison board, who said, "Are you out of your freaking mind? You're letting a convict make a gun in your prison? What are you going to do if he escapes with the gun?" And the warden said, "I will serve the rest of his sentence." And so that lesson I teach to the cadets at West Point when it comes to the creative process, because it's not enough just to have a good idea. Good ideas need champions, people who are going to fight for it. And they're as much the hero of the story, if not more, than the person who initially comes up with the dream.
Absolutely. Max, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This has been a fascinating discussion. Hopefully we can do it again sometime when your next work comes out.
Oh, this was great. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Take care and happy holidays.
Take care, man. Good luck.
And to everybody, don't go away. We are going to be back in just a few moments. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we return, we're going to be talking with Rich Grimeau about Sasquatch. We're going to talk even more about the actual creature itself. We're going to be talking about the Olympic Project and the work that they do, and we're going to get into more about this creature itself. But really, what a fascinating discussion with Max Brooks. There was so much more that we could have discussed as well, and I would highly recommend picking up his books. I know a lot of you probably read World War Z and you saw the movie. I highly recommend picking up the book if you haven't, and of course pick up the book Devolution. I've been reading it. It is incredible, And it's a lot. I mean, it's fun. As much as we're talking about all of the, the heady stuff that we discussed, it's a fun read. And the minute I cracked it open, I was just sucked right into the story. And I think you will be as well. You can get it just by going to midnight.fm, clicking on Max's photo, and that will take you over to all of the stuff that you need right there. All right. Well, we'll take a quick break and then back with more Midnight Society here on Midnight FM.